Happy day 37. And today I want to talk about a quality or a skill that as a leader, as a parent, if you don't already possess it, which means a quality, it is something you can learn, a skill, and is incredibly important to becoming the strongest, most influential leader or even parent you can become. That's how important this is. And that's empathy. Empathy, again, not the same as sympathy. Sympathy would mean you feel sorry for someone. Empathy is simply understanding the space or place that that person is in and kind of appreciating that with them, so that way they feel that you're not judging them. Empathy, I grew up in a household where my mother is an incredible human being. She was born in 1943 in Germany. So if you can imagine, this is toward the end of World War II. So growing up in Germany post World War II, it was a really, trying time. As far as the way she describes it, the closest thing I can think of here in the US is sort of probably after the Great Depression, right? Where there's a depletion of resources, there's scarcity, and that sort of sets in, right, as a mindset. Scarcity mindset is something that a lot of the mass consciousness live with. So post-World War II in Germany, she is the oldest of 6 children. Now when I say oldest, she's a twin, but she was the first twin born. And if you don't think an hour makes a difference, it certainly did. By the time she was 14 years old, she had already graduated from school. She was the first woman valedictorian of her class. This was in the 50s, but she had to get a job. Her father was ill or had already passed away, but she became financially responsible to care for her entire family, her mother, all the siblings. So she became a seamstress. She was an apprentice to a seamstress, but she worked very hard. My mother moved to the States. She married my dad, ends up moving to the States in the latter part of the 70s. And growing up as a child, this is what I observed. I observed this incredible, exceptional work ethic. I never saw my mother call out sick from work. She was always the last one to leave for the day. She was a leader, she was brilliant, she was driven, and that's how I was going to be when I grew up. And when I started my career, I was just that way. What I found was the parts of my mom as a leader that I was able to observe didn't have a sign of empathy. So it's not a quality that I came with. I was very rigid. I still probably do, have little tolerance for people calling out of work. My mentality has always been, you're either in the emergency room or you're dead. And I know that's extreme. We talked about extreme language. But calling out, you have to be ill to such a level that you're either know you could get your teammate sick and therefore it's selfish to go to work. Otherwise, can you cope through it? That's kind of always been my mentality. Because of that though, when people truly genuinely needed to be out of work, I didn't show any empathy. I didn't have that quality. So now empathy, what's on the other end? If you're not empathetic, what's on the other end? And that's going to be a lack of empathy, right? Or apathy. And as a leader, being apathetic is incredibly damaging. But I didn't know that. It took me time. I had to learn that. How do you start to develop the skill of empathy? For me, I had to start looking at the workspace and the teammates, the members, the people who reported to me more as like my child. Now, I'm not saying they're my children or they're, adolescent. I'm saying from a standpoint of the love I look at my child with. Right? As a parent, my mother showed me empathy. I didn't see her do it on a professional level. Didn't mean she didn't have it, I just didn't see it. So I had to really look at these team members with a different set of lenses in that circumstance so I could draw myself back from that driven, intense work ethic to say, gosh, I'm so sorry you feel that way. I know you certainly don't want to feel that way. I hope you feel better. As elementary as that might sound to you, because maybe you have the quality of empathy already, a lot of people don't, and I was one of them. So why are we talking about this? In looking at leaders today that I develop and mentor in general, and kind of reading up on the qualities of leaders that are paramount to a successful culture. Empathy is one of the top ones. It's whether you're looking at a top 10 list, top 21, you're going to see empathy on the list. What was concerning or disappointing to me this morning is I was reading an article in Forbes where they were talking about the presence of empathy in the workplace was on a consistent decline. Can you imagine working in an environment where it feels like there is no emotion, there's no presence or understanding? Well, apparently that's what's happening. So if you are that leader who believes there's not a place for empathy, or if you develop leaders who you can see convey being apathetic, try to get in front of this and teach this skill. Now, empathy doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you, it's a little softer, right? It doesn't even make you soft, it just makes you softer. Be aware of this. You have to get in front of it. You can be incredibly driven, right? Because the other piece in the absence of empathy, or where apathy lives, what I have always found was that that's where my drive can live, right? Because what will happen is when I'm like, you don't get to be sick. You don't get to take, a 2-hour lunch instead of an hour lunch. We have things to do. So that was my drive. So the way that I began to learn this quality was my mentor had told me, you have to balance your empathy and your drive. So that way you're seen as a leader who cares and people want to work with. So I hope this was a little longer conversation, but again, empathy is incredibly important to the glue and structure of your team and the overall culture. So try to balance your empathy and your drive. And if you don't have this as a skill or a quality, you can grow it, you can learn it. It takes some filtering and it takes some practice, I know. It was a lot. Fortunately, I learned it a long time ago, but in 25 years, those first few years, I wouldn't have wanted to work with me, looking back on it. So to those of you that did, if you're out there, and some of you are, Mike Hebron is one of them. He used to work with me back then. Gosh, I appreciate you going through the trenches with me at that time. Be a better leader than I was then, all right? Guys, have a great day, and we'll talk tomorrow.